This is the websites.ca podcast, where we help Canadian small businesses build and maintain an effective website and online presence.
Hello, websites.ca audience. This is Sean Corbett here again with websites.ca marketing, and we're continuing our series on getting leads and then cultivating warm leads into sales. This is part two, where I'm mostly going to talk about the cold lead harvesting process, which we've been doing via text outreach. So I brought on my business partner, Ross Mann, to talk to us about that. Ross mainly handles the texting side of things, and I handle the email side of things. Ross, thanks for being here.
No, thanks for having me again.
For sure. So I'll sort of interview you, Ross, and go through the steps, even though we both work in tandem. It'll be the easiest way, I think, for the audience to follow it. The preface that I wanted to put here is that it seems, and jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that the Canadian regulations are a lot more lax for business texting than they are in the US. And most of what we've been doing is texting in the US. So everybody who's listening today, if you're, depends on where you're located and where you want to get the leads from, you'll have to find out sort of the legalities and stuff in your jurisdiction. But we've found that with US, I think there's probably more rules.
Yeah, the U.S. definitely is further along with rules, regulations, and how you communicate, when you communicate, what's in the communication, who you can text, and all of that. Where the current situation in Canada seems to be a lot more relaxed, although I suspect, just like the U.S., it will follow any do not call registry, as well as any type of mass communication regulation that already exists. In the United States, it's very similar to what they call robocalls, automated message sending, stuff like that. It strictly follows those rules, and then there's some extra add-ons and carve-outs for the texting system. So Canada probably follows suit, but yeah, it seems a lot more straightforward right now in Canada.
Yeah, and before anybody's eyes roll to the back of their head, we're not going to get deep into the weeds, into regulations and so on, although we'll touch on them. But interestingly enough, common sense really applies here. So like Ross said, robocalling is regulated, right? Business calling, people might recall, well, people who are old enough might recall, in the 90s, you would get calls at dinner time from solicitors, and then folks got really upset about that, and then you could get put on a do not call list and so on. So if you just use your common sense, right? If you're not actually spamming people and you're not lying and you're saying who you are, it's very similar. If anyone's listened to my old episodes about canned spam and emailing, you really just have to tell people who you are, where you're from, what you're all about, and give them an opportunity to say no. And you've kind of jumped all the hurdles. Now, before we get into the nitty gritty of like our steps and what we do and how we overcome the regulations and how we go about getting the leads and building the lists and all these kind of things, just to lay some of the groundwork, there are several tools in which to do this. So there's out-of-the-box solutions. You can build custom program solutions. Probably some people who are listening have heard of Twilio, which is a provider for basically digital phone numbers and things like that. You can run texting through that. So there's a million different ways to go about this. We will talk about one of the tools that we use, but again, it's not the only tool you have to use. It's just the one that we're familiar with. And it's really not about the tool. It's about the processes and what you're doing. So highest level, Ross, when we started looking into this, and the biggest question we asked ourselves is like, will cold texting actually work at all in business in 2024, 2023, 2024? And what we found out from our investigation, because we were kind of called in to assess an existing campaign, see how viable it was, and see if we could scale it up. And that's how we discovered this whole process. What we came across at the very start was the psychology behind the messaging.
The messaging is very interesting, and as we discussed offline earlier, is the message is delivered to a platform that people find deeply personal, right? It's to their phone. It's not to their phone in a secondary app, although the messaging app is an app, but it's not through like Facebook Messenger or Instagram or TikTok or any of that other social media and messaging systems. It's in the text program, which they use to text family, friends, do business work themselves, as well as it's an app from the very beginning of phone, right? So a lot of people see it as an essential part of that hardware, and it gets delivered directly to them. So the psychology behind it seems to be a lot deeper and connected than these other apps, and we found that it was interesting how and when people reply on that system.
Yeah, the psychology behind notifications is really interesting too. So, as most people know who have a cell phone and they have it set up, like Ross said, with the various social media platforms, people can get a notification if they get a phone call. They might get a notification if they get a post to their favorite social platform, if they get an email, if they get a text. But what we've found is that people don't treat notifications equally. And on some phones and some platforms and whatever, that I guess the notification might make a different sound, it might have a different color, whatever. None of that matters. And also, what doesn't matter is if you're listening to this and you think, well, I would never answer a cold text. Well, I don't care about my text notifications. Well, I don't use my phone in that way. These are the exact same things we said ourselves when we looked into this. So we were actually deeply skeptical because we don't use our phones like that. We don't care about our phones like that. What we found from our sends, from last year to this year, and now with the success that we've been having with it, is it doesn't matter what we think, and it doesn't matter what a small selection of the market thinks. There's an overwhelming amount of people that treat their phones exactly like Ross said. Like, it's still intimate and interesting and exciting. And if it's a text, at least to their phone, they will answer it almost instantaneously. So even more so than a phone call, more than physical mail. Again, it's a subset of people. We're not saying you can reach everyone like this, but for the kind of person, and there's a lot of them, for the kind of person that is paying attention to texts to their cell phone, they're very engaged and they're very responsive. And one of the theories we had behind that, right, is that we're not going against the grain, right, Ross? We're working with what all of the government and the media and the social media companies have taught them how to gamify their phones, the dopamine drip effect they get from playing with their phones, all that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, very much so. It's they've learned over the years that to receive information on their phone is more trustworthy than anything else. Like other means of advertising and other means of marketing do work, but they work under certain conditions. This one seems to be that you receive this information and you're excited to get it. Again, like we mentioned just earlier, the other way they use texts um, helps them think of our texts in a similar fashion, which is great for us.
Yeah, and that kind of dovetails into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the actual messaging itself. So, again, elephant in the room. I know I personally get a few like actual scammy texts once a month, or not once a month, but a couple times a month, let's say. And at least where I'm living, and again, I don't know where you're listening to this, but I'm in Western Canada, and the texts that I get are very, very, very obviously fake messages that say they're from the Canadian Revenue Agency, something about taxes, something about social insurance numbers, usually, or they're trying to pretend to be a bank or a credit card company or the post office.
I love the
So,
one that I would get that's Amazon, and there's some sort of special package like an iPhone or something that is ready to deliver. If I just press this one button,
yeah, that's right. That FedEx, whatever, right? Yeah, your delivery is stuck and you need to click this link. So, I mean, anybody who's like doing messaging and worrying about this kind of stuff, you just have to kind of look at that and think, okay, I just don't want my message to look like that, obviously. With most of the tools we use, they won't even let you put a link outgoing. So, interestingly enough, most of the tools have like baked into the cake. They have things that'll protect you from not looking like a scammer. So that's great. But the big epiphany for us is because we both come from marketing side of things, is when we looked at the messaging that appeared to be working with the initial campaign before we took it over. And then as we modified the messaging and tweaked it and made it better, the big thing that bubbled to the surface was to keep it simple and keep it very straightforward. There was really nothing fancy about it. In fact, the opposite.
yeah, just think of the messages they get from everyone else, right? It's usually in text style of English, right? Some broken words, lack of punctuation, straightforward, short. Now, the regulation requires us to just put certain things in that other people wouldn't do, but if you're simplifying it and not trying to get too fancy with it, it seems to be working much better than if you were to try and do something quite extensive and complicated.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that is also true too. If you try to be too texty, we haven't, we've tested a little bit of it, but putting like emojis and talking in text speak with acronyms and so on, it really depends on what business you're in. I think if I was local, if I was doing marketing for an artist, or I was trying to sell merchandise or something like that, we might lean more into that. So with everything that we teach, the messaging always has to be attuned to your audience and obviously to what your branding is and so on. With our particular clients, the one that we're using as a case study for this podcast and also the eventual course that we'll be doing is a little bit more how it, like, let's say professional. There's actually a lot more regulations baked into what our client does. Nothing to do with texting, just our client has a lot of regulations. So when we contact people, we make it, and again, this is something that'll be in more detail in the course. We obviously can't give everything away for free here, but and I think we probably have some non-disclosure issues with our client. But essentially, the structure of the messaging is really, you can just follow this. It's say your name and who you are, so the company you're from, why you're contacting them, and then what you want them to do next, and in as pithy a way as possible. And that's literally it. And then people will put up their hands and say yay or nay from there. But the interesting thing we found about that messaging and like who we are and why we're contacting us was we kind of devised a strategy to build up the affinity factors.
Yeah, the more affinity you have, like in all things, the better response we get. And also, to a degree, getting people out of the way that don't want to participate, right? If you're clear of who you are and what you're doing, the people that have really truly have zero interest in it are just going to move on and not waste your time, and therefore not waste their time as well.
Yep. And the biggest comebacks we get from people, because of course you're always going to have reasonable objections, and we actually learned that if the people who have an initial reasonable rejection are actually better leads than anybody else, because they're slightly skeptical, and that means they're paying attention. They can be convinced. So our biggest objections we get is, how did you get this number? Why are you reaching out to me? Mainly stuff like that. So again, one should have a good reply ready for that. And the tools that we use to do the outbound texting, they also have little windows where you can have replies and conversations, because very often when we're texting a lead, we're asking them for permission or interest, right? Do you have interest in this? Would you like to know more about it? They say yes. And then we switch to, okay, well then give us your email address and we'll have the owner email you some information. So it's not an instantaneous process. And like we just said, we're not putting in links to click or anything like that, like a scammer would do. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Like, we obviously want to talk about the regulations and stuff at some point, Ross, but is there anything else you wanted to add about the messaging that I left out?
Well, just to recap a little bit, the message should be clear in who we are, what we're doing, and all of that. And don't make it too long. So it's okay to have someone, like you said, reply back saying, "Who is this?" or "Why'd you contact me? How'd you get my number?" If you try to resolve that in the first message, it might get a little long, right? And we want someone to reply. We want someone to ask a question, because if they're reasonable and we're reasonable, we have reasonable replies, we create a reasonable conversation going. And from there, we can have a back and forth like you would in a real sales conversation in person, just over text. A lot of people do things like they do in person over text. And once that's going, then it's a lot easier for them to start building a trust with us. So I wouldn't put everything in the first message, and obviously Sean, you're not arguing for that either. Understand that part of the approach is to get a second message from them so you can continue on.
Yeah, exactly. There's going to be a back and forth. That's right. So you need to accept that. You need to accept that there are going to be the implication that a good lead is going to have some questions or objections. And yeah, just to reiterate what Ross said there, is that you're aware of those objections. You're not trying to address all of them on the first message, is all he's saying. So if they do ask you, how did you get my name, or why are you doing this, then you should have a pithy comeback to that. And it's totally reasonable to ask those questions. The other thing that we found is that messaging that implies teamwork or partnership, at least for our client, this is something people might want to test, but at least for our client, that tends to work better. So we are not saying like, hey, do you want to buy this? Hi, it's Sean from company X. Do you want to buy this thing I'm selling? We'll say something like, hey, it's Sean from company X. We're looking to partner with more people who want blah, blah, blah benefit, or who like blah, blah, blah thing, or who want to eliminate blah, blah, blah pain. Is that something you'd be interested in? And then finally, there's some regulatory it's fuzzy if it's a regulation or not, but we do like to include this, just like for canned spam and all that kind of thing. We actually put at the end of our messages some form of instruction that says text stop if you don't want to hear from us again. So it's very upfront. And again, a lot of people who were involved in this got nervous right away because they said, well, we don't want to tell the lead to not talk to us. And our thinking was, and it proved out, was, no, we want to be as upfront as possible. It's a business transaction. That's what we're texting them about, but we will not bother them if they don't want it anymore. So it actually eases people off. And then, of course, like you said, Ross, rather than them worrying about that we're going to bug them, if they're even remotely interested, they start asking questions.
Yeah, it's part of building that trust layer, right? So we're immediately giving them the option to never hear from us again. Why would someone that is trying to hurt them or defraud them or scam them give them such an easy opt out, right? So it helps build that trust.
Yeah, for sure. So moving on from that, I was going to ask you, and again, we don't want to go into crazy details because it's probably very boring, but talk to me about, at least for the US that we've been texting, what type of account are we setting up in order to be able to text out, and what are some of the main regulations around it?
So everything falls under a regulatory program called the 10DLC, and it's basically for the phone number you're going to use, and you have to tell the regulator what you're going to do with it, why are you using it, some examples of the messages you're going to send, how people can opt in and opt out, information on how you're collecting contacts and all that. There's different levels, basically to tell them, the regulators, how extensive you're going to use the system. So a small, kind of like a hobby plan, if you will, is around 10,000 messages a day. And then it just goes up from there. And the idea behind that is that the regulator wants to know what volume you're going to be sending, and to do extra scrutiny about potential wide-scale flooding of information. So it just requires a little bit of upfront work on your part to figure out what you're doing and what you're going to plan on doing, and some information about your company, all that. I found it pretty straightforward. The only time I've ever got a rejection is, I think we just messed up one little thing on one of the templates, and it was just a typo. And once we repaired that, it went right through. So they're pretty forgiving there, and they're pretty encouraged to have people register. They want people to send. They understand the importance of sending text. They want people to send text. They just want everyone to follow the rules and to be registered, so that if something does happen, it can be resolved, to keep the spammers out and to legitimize the whole process.
And when you say template, you basically mean that's the part of the process where you have to give them some sample messages of what you expect to text out?
Yeah, it's that's exactly what. There's a little field that you say this is the example of what we're going to send, and yeah, as long as you meet all the recommendations on how that should look, then you're pretty good to go.
Nice, yeah, and like you were saying, we were getting the impression that really what they're doing is essentially absolving themselves from liability. So they have to at least have the illusion of an upfront gatekeeping of some kind. And if you pass the smell test, they're pretty happy to get you on to the next stage.
Yeah, and that's what the regulator and the regulator again in the States and if you work a little bit and kind of follow the mass digital marketing regulations for robo or telemarketing and all of that. So you might want to check that. Now that there's carriers that are involved, right? Your phone carriers. And they have different rules, not necessarily the same rules across the board, and they can be a little bit more stringent than the regulator. So they deliver your message to their customers effectively, right? So they want to make sure that they're protecting their customers and having their best interests and not letting people that might pass the smell test with regulators but still are bad actors. So that's when we will start hitting rate limitations. So we might be regulatorily allowed to send more, but the carrier might throttle us. They're the ones that would require different messaging, say in the case of word stop or opt out or whatever that might be. They want to make sure that their customers are aware of why they're getting a message and why it was delivered to them. So you'll have to consider that as well. And that can come in the form of looking up the regulations and rules from the carrier or playing it safe and doing a lot of testing.
Yeah, and we always favor, which is a bit contrarian to the other people in the industry, we tend to favor less personalization than more personalization. So the biggest example that I often give clients is they'll say, "Well, why when you write emails, why don't you start with the contact's name, Sean?" And I'll say, "Well, it's A, because I found in the past staff write the wrong name or misspell the name. The person themselves, when they fill out the form, they're clicking so fast they write their name incorrectly. So now it's like a glaring obvious thing that it's automated in the future. Like let's say the name's Steve, but they write it with a lowercase s instead of an uppercase s. Now every time you send them an email in the future, they're reminded that it's like, oh, this is just a form field. And even if they don't know that, it's a subconscious itchiness. It's not good. You don't want to introduce on the process. And I've also found that a lot of times, depending on where you got the lead, you might not have even got their first name. So I just did away with personalization altogether, at least in this stage of the funnel, and I saw absolutely no difference in my responses. So we've found that it just doesn't matter. Excuse me. And when we took over this texting project, the the existing vendor that was helping our client, he was kind of tapping out because the regulations had just changed across the board quite massively. So that's another thing to be aware of is like everything that we're telling you about today and in our course, it's better to get on it sooner rather than later because things do change and sometimes wells dry up and whatever. And right now this is very fertile ground. But the big thing that we came in on was you used to be able to, if you thought you knew the contact's name, because of course you get a list from somewhere to text them. If you thought you knew their name, you could put their name right into the initial message with an automation. And right away we saw that and we took that out. And another interesting thing that we saw is the tool that we were using to text, they had a bunch of suggestions. And again, with any kind of software or tools or whatever, a lot of the suggestions are so broad as to not be applicable to most businesses because most businesses have, like I always come back to, a certain branding, positioning angle, the way they like to speak. They know their clients best, that kind of thing. So the tool advised us to not use our exact company name or to be a bit vague about the company and what we did. And I can't even remember the exact reasoning behind that. But our attitude was like, no, we're going to be totally upfront. We're going to tell people the exact company name. And in fact, we want them to Google us and check and see who we are. Because even if they don't become a lead right away, we felt like even increasing that awareness for our client was, a downstream benefit.
Yeah, it goes again towards the building that foundation of trust. If they can look us up on Google or wherever, YouTube, whatever, then it legitimizes some, right? And then maybe they will get back to us. Yeah, so these tools do have guidelines and restrictions and whatnot, and do what you think is best for your message, not necessarily what they're telling you to do. Like, don't break any rules, but if they're saying to do it one way, well, that might just work for their experience. Find a way that works for you within the rule set. Just like how we've used the follow-up systems and stuff like that. We don't necessarily follow their recommendations on follow-up messages versus initial messages. And yeah, just write what makes sense and be straightforward and honest, really.
Yeah, it's funny how that actually works out across all aspects of life, not just business. So what we'll try to do now is to give a full spectrum overview of the entire setup. I'll give the sketch, Ross, and then you could maybe fill in the details first on list selection and then on our process for first sends, follow-ups, replies, that kind of thing. The overarching framework, if people want to imagine it, is everything we're talking about on this podcast episode, you think of as basically your pre-funnel. So we want to get leads into a funnel, right? Once they're in the funnel for our company, you use your best medium of communication. So for most of my clients, that would be email or telephone or a combination of the two, sometimes with video trainings, that kind of thing. That relates to your own funnel, meaning once you have a lead and they say they're interested, you're taking them through that journey. And then that journey may have several different levels of a funnel where as they get more awareness, as they become a hotter potential buyer, right? It depends on what your sales cycle looks like. Again, with our clients, we sell really high-end stuff. We have a lot of regulatory ties that we have to take care of before we can even sell someone something. So it's a lot of back and forth, signing paperwork and so on. Big ticket items, and virtually nobody buys off the, well, I mean, you can't buy off the first contact because we don't really have a traditional product even to sell. So we're always aware that when a lead comes in, there's a long process attached to that, which is actually what part 3 about this, the podcast series, will be about. So today we're just talking about the pre-funnel, getting a lead to put into that funnel. So the phone number that we use to text out, that's a unique phone number. It's not tied to our business. It's not a phone that someone can call and they can get a service representative, okay? It's strictly for outreach. The person doing the outreach is strictly focused on outreach. So the person actually texting and replying to the text and so on, that's their sole focus and their sole job is that. And they're even instructed, even if they know more about the company, they're even instructed to basically say, like, look, my job is to find people who kind of fit this profile and say they're interested, and then I'm going to send you over to the owner or to an account rep or whatever, and they're the ones who can answer your questions. And so that from that unique phone number that only does outbound texting, it's tied into our texting tools. We upload a list to our texting tools that Ross will talk about in a second, the list selection. And then we work that list by sending out an initial message or set of messages, which is what we've already covered in this episode, sort of the structure and the style of the messages we send out. And then essentially you're getting no replies, replies to stop, replies to put them on a do not call list, which most tools automates and they'll never contact them again. And then you get some sort of warm replies. Yes, I'm interested. Tell me more, whatever. From there, you have to work those replies. So your outbound team member, in addition to the sends, let's say if you think about it in terms of the day, they get up in the morning, they do their sends. Now they have to work on immediate replies and replies from the day before. But then there's also, due to regulations, you can only do these initial send outs, these initial blasts, once every 30 days. However, if you've been doing this for months and months and months, obviously you're going to have some contacts from your previous month that you can now send to again. Typically, we find that we will send them what we call a follow-up message. But as Ross alluded to before, what we found with our texting was that there was no benefit speaking to the contact as if we were doing a follow-up. So our follow-up message doesn't say things like, hey, as we said last month, or hey, I'm just following up from my previous text, because what we found is most people just delete and forget about the previous text. So all we did is we wrote a slightly different message because you want to hit them from a slightly different angle. And then we just retexted them again. So I guess, Ross, before you go through that whole process of replies and follow-ups and whatever, just talk to us a little bit about the list selection.
Sure. So, like any other kind of audience selection or segmentation, you want to figure out who you're trying to contact, right? Like kind of marketing. And I've found that there's various list providers and contact providers. In fact, I have a meeting with another one next week, who's taking a different angle than we've been taking with our example client. And for once you've kind of figured out what audience you're messaging, then you want to find out where you can collect that contact information, and then you want to go further and figure out an approximation property, like a property of the or characteristic of that individual that you can filter on once you find a data set. So in our case, when we were doing approximation of a certain value type, we found a vast database of the contacts that we need in general, but we didn't need all of them, right? We needed a subset of those people that would bring us closer to our client's goal, and the audience that he needs to talk to. So we found a property within that database to filter even stronger, and narrow that list even more. Now, the list has to be big. It has to be very big, because first off, once you get a list, there's going to be a lot of people that are on the do not contact list. And in the States, you can't contact them, right? So that's going to reduce your total amount by a lot. And then from there,
Can you give a basic approximation? Is it like a cut it in half? Let's say if you buy 20,000 contacts, you kind of instantly go down to 10,000 you can actually contact.
I was just doing the math on that for a client. So anywhere between 1/3 and half and 1/3. Yeah, it's quite vast. Because the do not call list has been around for a very, very long time. And so if they registered for do not call back in the early 2000s, and they're still on that list, and that still applies. Now, who knows? Maybe they do want text nowadays, but that's not how it works. Now, that being said, these contacts are fairly cheap because they're broad. The list providers don't really know any of the details of what you're using them for. It's up to you to kind of narrow down, dissect, segment, and figure out what contacts are the most valuable to you. But the list providers don't. You could find probably list providers that will provide a very narrow set, and maybe also they make sure that there's no do not calls on that list, but that's going to cost you more, likely, per contact, which is fine. It just could save you some work. Then from there, what we do is we remove the residential lines. Now, most of the contacts have both residential and mobile, but I remove them so that we save our texting tool from figuring that out. The reason why I do that is that the texting tool will attempt to contact that landline and decide that is a landline, and that will not bog down, but slow down the rate of which we can send later.
So is there a tool that helps you identify which is a mobile number and which is a residential number?
Yeah, it depends on where you get your list from, but a good list provider should be able to specify that's a residential, the phone type. So I just
Got it.
just that out. Now, you don't have to. Like I have technical skills that some people may not have, right? So you can just put it in the system, and most of the providers of the texting system will be able to figure that out for you. But then your number will go down a little bit more. There really wouldn't be a lot of people that are pure residential anymore. I don't gather, but I don't know everyone's audience.
It's less of a problem in 2024. Maybe 10 years ago, it would have been like a 50-50 split, right? But I don't know anyone that has a residential telephone anymore.
Yeah. Or anyone that solely has a residential telephone number, right? So it does come in the data that we've been purchasing, and I just strip it out because it's just extra data that I don't want to muddy up our statistics and all that. So so you go and you buy a basket of contacts. It should be fairly cheap. We experience around anywhere from 5 cents to 12 cents a contact. And then again, basically double that price because almost half of them are no longer contactable. So then that kind of brings it up to a quarter a contact, and then we load it into the system.
Yeah, and to put a little bit more detail on what you were saying before with the filters and the proxies of filters. So just to give people an example, let's say that you know that all of your best customers, every single one of them, 100% of your best customers, are subscribers to Men's Health magazine. Well, then what you would do is you would go and try to acquire a list of all of the subscribers to Men's Health magazine. And you could probably do that in this day and age. And like Ross said, it would be a smaller list because it would be more targeted and less general, and it would cost more money. But you determined at the start of the process that all your clients, that, the Venn diagram of your clients and Men's Health subscribers perfectly overlaps. But let's say that you determined that your clients were like males aged 20 to 45 of at least middling income or above. Well, what we would call an approximate or a proxy stand-in is then you might say, okay, well, Men's Health subscribers, that's going to sort of generally overlap with what I'm looking for. So you have to be a little bit circumspect about how you're assembling your list, right? Whatever you're looking for. Ross and I have had some clients where it's solely by job title. And the specific job title of one client that we worked with, it didn't exist anywhere else. So if we targeted anywhere, LinkedIn, mail, telephone, whatever, if we looked for that one job title, we got a 1-to-1 match, basically for prospects, right? It doesn't mean that they bought from us. It just means that they were a perfect qualified prospect. So again, we're trying to tell you, the listener, it really depends on who your ideal clients are and how you want to filter. What we had to do for our latest client is, with this texting outreach, is that we're essentially looking for high net worth people or high income people. So we tested a bunch of things with job title. It didn't always give us the results that we wanted. So what we sort of did is we did a combination of location and home value. We did location because we wanted, as we said earlier on this podcast, we wanted some kind of affinity. So we try to make a list of what are all the affinities, what are ways people could relate to our client, right, to the owner of the company. And the most obvious one, like the most obvious ways people relate are you look like them, you sound like them, you have similar interests, you live nearby, that kind of thing. So we just went with the most obvious thing. Let's target people who live near where the company is located. It may sound very facile to people, but we found it was actually really powerful. So the further and further away that we get from living nearby where the company is located, even though the company doesn't just do business there, we found that we had to change the messaging so drastically to get the same response. So then once we had people who lived nearby, we started looking, okay, how can we compile lists of people who live nearby that probably earn over the average amount of money? So one proxy we came up with for that was home ownership above a certain value. So again, you see that this is not exactly like the exactness of the science is related to your business and your audience. Ross and I can't say on this podcast, this is the exact way to compile a list. This is the exact way to buy a list, because all of your audiences are different. But you need to sit down and start thinking of what are my filters, and then what are maybe a one step removed proxies for my filters. And this doesn't just apply to texting, by the way. You should have already been doing this for all of your marketing, all of your outreach, and all of your customer service. So it's an exercise that benefits you across the board. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It should be something you're doing it. You should already have this kind of exercise in place if you've been doing any type of online marketing or even offline marketing. And those are good approximations for our client. You just have to kind of think about where these people would be, as in all marketing exercises. So if someone came to me and was asking me, again, similar to our example client here, high net worth people, and we didn't have the access to the housing information that we had, I would just start thinking, well, what else do these people do? You see, talked about Men's Health magazine. Well, can you get a list of, say, golfers?
Yeah, like luxury goods, club memberships. You can buy a list that have those things. You can get a list from a conference. You can use skip tracing platforms. The big thing to know, just for everyone listening, is that you'll have to budget to buy lists every so often, and you'll certainly have to budget to buy a startup list to get going on this type of outreach.
Yeah, and from those larger lists, you still might want to do some additional narrowing, like we talked about the proxies or approximations of who your ideal contact is. So if you had a large list from all the conferences in the United States, let's say, narrow it further based on conference type, and then narrow it further based on time of attendance or something like that, and that can get you a little less contacts, but probably more success, just like in all marketing. So you got to figure out that proper characteristic to narrow a little bit more.
Yeah. And again, when we say narrow, like we're talking about from going from maybe 6 figures to 5. Like you want to definitely be starting off your campaigns with at least 5 figures worth of contacts, right?
Yeah, because it's a volume thing, right? Remember, there'll be DNC as well as plenty of people are just going to reactionarily just say stop, right? So you got to filter through those, and then you'll have the remainder of the people that are quite good at responses and your target audience. However, you will burn through them pretty quickly, even if a lot of them are saying yes. So you need a startup list, and you need to continually put in new purchase lists, because as Sean said at the beginning, once you work through that initial list, there's a cool off period where you have to wait about a month before you can follow up, however way you want to do that, follow up with the list that never got back to you at all, stop or otherwise. So to wait on that list to refresh, it could be a lot of downtime. So if you have a large list that you segment, or a few large lists that you can alternate through, then you're always sending initial messages and follow-up messages throughout the month, and it keeps everything going, and it keeps the leads flowing in.
Yep, no, that's a really good point. So I just thought of an example. This is not obviously what we do, but hopefully it's illustrative. Is that if whatever your budget allowed you to, you'd buy the most amount of contacts or budget allowed, and then if there was an obvious segment, you'd maybe try to split it into 2. If there wasn't an obvious segment, you could just split it into 2 by volume. And then what we do is we start doing our initial sends on day 1 of the month, and then by about halfway through the month, day 15 or so, then we start in on a second list. And what that does is it staggers our 30-day window, right? So the people that we start contacting on day 1, we can do follow-up messages to them on day 1 of the following month. And same thing then on the day 15 people, day 15 of the following month. So the example that I thought of is, let's say, you had a list of tennis players, and you could segment them by people who they want to buy like gear, balls and strings and all that kind of stuff that needs to be constantly replaced. But then maybe there's people who want to sell higher ticket items to, like, coaching, tournaments, events, things like that. And again, you might have a past customer list that is even worth re-pinging via text, but the past customers are going to get a different message than brand new cold text people are. So this is how you can think of ways of slicing, dicing, segmenting, and filling up your entire month with messages, and without having to wait 30 days before sending new messages, right? We're saying you have to wait 30 days to send to that same person or that same list segment. But if you have multiple segments going at once, then you're only waiting however many days it took for you to start your second, third, fourth, fifth segment.
And it may take a few goes. Like we've seen, hilariously, because in our system you can see all the messages that we sent, but as Sean mentioned, we know they're just deleting and moving on in some cases. So we can see that we sent them 3 or 4 messages before we get an actual positive response.
Yeah, if a contact doesn't say stop or DNC, we keep re-texting them, reinitiating it once a month. Like we do the maximum we can, right? Which is once a month. And we've gotten leads off of third or fourth, so 4 months down the line from a list. Obviously, your list gets smaller every time because you're picking up people who say no and yes. But because you paid for that list, you really want to work it to the bone. So yeah, Ross, maybe you could give them an idea of how that generally works with initial sends, follow-ups, and then what you like to do, which is the back and forths with warm leads.
Yeah, so once you got your list, you load in the system, you do your initial send. And that initial send has regulations around it, like we discussed. That's basically where the regulations exist. Once that goes out, people are going to say stop, they're going to ignore you, or they're going to get back to you in various ways. So when they don't get back to you at all, like Sean just said, we then have a window to message them again in 30 days. So those are the people that just ignore us completely. They don't say stop, and or they don't express disinterest or anything like that. Just it's kind of ignored us. And then there's folks that will respond positively or respond in any way, like we said at the beginning. They have questions: where'd you find our number, or who is this, and so on. From there, we have not canned responses, but teed up responses where we've pre-written some stuff that should work. And I sometimes can send them directly out, kind of like canned responses. And in some cases, I'll just reread it and make sure it kind of applies to the context of what this person said. So it's not a completely, set it and forget it system. You need someone that's sending the text to understand the product and how to engage in conversation that won't be off-putting to the person on the other side. So if they ask one question and it kind of fits, and you send that templated message that will just seem jarring and weird, it's not going to work, right? So I load up the canned or templated message and make slight modifications that I think will help push the conversation forward.
No, I want to put a really fine point on that, because that was one of our innovations that we did. We pulled off all fully automated stuff, and we pulled off any ESL workers or virtual assistants or whatever. What we've found makes it, obviously there's a little bit more upfront cost. Obviously it's a little bit more manual, but what we found, especially when we're dealing with the big ticket item sales that we're doing, is exactly what Ross just said, is you need somebody, at least when you're initially running the campaign and setting it up and composing these templated responses that can be customized. You need someone who understands the business, the product, the messaging style, the brand of the company's voice, and someone who's paying attention and thinking to the responses people give. Now, once you do it for a couple of months, you'll notice that there's really only 4 to 6 questions everyone asks, right? They ask a variation of them, but essentially it boils down to the same question. And then you can workshop that with your team, depending on how big your team is, or if you're the head of marketing, or if you're the head of the company or whatever. You just want to look at what those main questions and objections are, come up with a really pithy, solid answer for them. And then at that point, it might be safe to hand it off to somebody. But again, you want a trusted person. This is absolutely not like, you need a system here where someone understands the English language and the company and the product at a very high level. That's where we found that we saw the most improvement, is we were not willing to say, oh, let's cut corners on this thing or that thing, right?
Yeah, it again builds the foundation of trust. People can sniff out pretty quickly when something's not right, especially language and the context of that language, and feels like a canned response. But yeah, the initial message will fall into like 3 or 4 categories and a variation of those, and therefore my initial responses to those responses from the contact fall into 3 or 4 categories, and then I just make modifications based on their slate, different modifications to how they're answering it. And then from there, they'll usually have one more follow-up, and then I'll have another set of responses to that follow-up. Again, make modifications where applicable. And then, yeah, for us, we have about 3 to 4 back and forths before they typically say, okay, let's go. And they give us the permission / information we are seeking in order to push them into our actual funnel. Sometimes
I was just going to add there, Russ, for that, we choose email. So again, it's kind of a personalized thing. Whatever, I always say, do whatever your best game is, play your game. What's that? It
could be a phone call. It could be sending.
That's right. Yeah, it really depends on what the business is and how you like to receive leads and bring them in. In our case, it doesn't have to be this, but in our case, we like to do an email. It also creates a break between, like I was talking about in the process, it creates a break between the outreach person and now the funnel people. So let's say outreach person is Ross. His interaction with this person basically ends at that point. He says, okay, if you give me your email, I'll pass it on to Sean. Sean will follow up with all the necessary information. You can talk to him if you have any questions. And that way we're not, because what we've found sometimes when you're texting people is they'll say, oh, well, why are you texting? Just pick up the phone and call me. You have my number, and let's just talk and see if it's worth my while. again, if you're the owner and you're running this thing at the start where you get it set up, or you're the head marketer and you know the product really well, you could conceivably do that. We've found that, you may even want to just to see a couple times just to see what happens. But we found that that would slow the process down. So when we compartmentalize the process into these different steps, the actual information follow-up stage is where we say, okay, give us your email address. They give us the email address. Now we take it out of our texting system. We put it into our business CRM. We put it into our business funnel. That completely takes it over from there. And it basically just exists in an archive on the texting system from there on in, but we don't work it any further on the texting system. So it's important to create that break. And like what Ross said, there's always going to be a back and forth. Yes, I'm interested. Can you tell me more? How'd you get my name and number? Blah, blah, blah. You go back and forth and you say, look, the easiest thing is just give me your email address and I'll have the owner text you all the detail, or I'll have the owner email you all the details. Cool. And then at that point, the interaction is ended for that lead. It's also important to point out that when you're in the stage of replies, I guess we could call this the reply stage, right, Ross? Because they've responded and now you get to reply. When you're in that stage, most of the regulatory burden is actually lifted at that point. So it's only with initial sends and follow-up sends to people who have never replied to you that the regulations really come into play. Once they've replied to you, now it's like you know each other. You have them on your personal cell phone. Not really, but you can think of it like that way. And at that point, you could start texting them pictures, videos, links, whatever you wanted at that point, really.
Yeah, and often if they seem unsure and they want some assurity, like getting you on a phone call right away or something, and we can't facilitate that, I have sent out links because we have a very good set of YouTube videos and a nice website and stuff like that for this client. So I'll send them that, and then I have a series of follow-ups knowing that I sent them that. So instead of saying something along the lines of still looking for email, it'll be, hey, did you get a chance to look at the YouTube channel? And then once they say yes, they go back into the, hey, we need this information kind of part of the process. And that would kind of be something you need to consider how you'd work with any of these objections or questions or hurdles. One thing I should also point out is that, as many of us do, we see a text, can't get to that right now, we kind of clear the notification and we forget about it. Like, not that we didn't want to message, we just forget that we need to message. I say the contact, if I'm pretending I'm the contact for now. I just kind of clear it and, oh yeah, that was interesting. I need to get back to them, but I'm busy now. I'll get back to them later. And when we first took this over, I noticed there was a lot of kind of dead air between the messages. And the previous vendor was putting them on what they call a drip campaign, which is highly automated. And we found, actually, Sean, I believe you went through all of them and found that the drip campaigns are very ineffective. So what we do is we don't put them on drips when they kind of they ghost us or go away. I have a series of responses to warm them back up that says, Sean wrote a great first line for that. That basically reminds them that they owe us something still, reminds them that they didn't do what we asked them to do, but they said they would do it. And very often that message triggers in their mind and they do what we ask them to do, get us that information. Now, in some cases, people continue to ignore. We have 3 other messages that go out that kind of up that ante, if you will. They increase in the amount of, hey, you didn't get to us. You said you're going to get to us, or just a reminder, whatever it might be. That's our true follow-up. That's our true follow-up system, is that we send them messages that remind them about what we're doing, what we're talking about, and the request, the call to action that we ask them to do that they haven't done yet. And I found that to be way more effective than automated templated follow-up messages that go out as if they were follow-ups and say, hey, just following up, blah, blah, blah.
You're playing it by ear and you're looking at what previously has been said, right? So we may have templates written, but you're deciding which template to choose in some cases based on what you've previously talked to them about, which you might not have been able to do if you just put them on a complete 100% automation.
Yeah, because automation requires general writing, right? That it's not going to be specific or contextual to the conversation we're having, and that's going to be just going to feel fake and spammy, right? So I don't mind even though I have to do this by hand, I don't mind doing that because one, it's pretty quick with the systems that we have, and two, it seems way more effective to do it that way. Now, if they don't get back to us at all, right? We have the actual follow-up system, the secondary mass send out, which acts similarly to the initial. And again, like we said, that they might get 3 or 4 of those. I can see it in the history, and then they respond. And we know they don't see it because sometimes the response is, "Who is this? Why are you messaging me?" They clearly haven't seen any of the other messages before, right? And they go through that system. That's kind of the general process we have.
To give people some context too, if you buy a list and you have 50,000 people on your list, depending on what texting tool you're using, depending on what plan you're on, how much you're paying per month, what kind of limits you have and that kind of thing. It's not just a simple matter of clicking one button and then all 50,000 people get texted instantly. These things get loaded up. There's caps on it. Sometimes the caps are imposed by the tool itself. Sometimes the caps are imposed by the regulatory bodies, the carriers, and so on. So, excuse me, if you buy a master list, you might have to work it over the course of 4 or 5 days, maybe even 2 weeks, depending on how big the list is, because you're doing your max send outs per day. So then Ross, and you can jump in here and clarify, I believe you organize your day and that you open it up. We can talk about timing too, if you think there's a good timing or not. Like we like to work during business hours because we just can't reply on the weekends. The rest of the staff with the client we work with can't reply on the weekends. So we just don't text on the weekends. But you'll open it up, you'll do your initial sends. Once the program processes those, then you go into your messaging box, and that's when you start working your replies, right? So it's kind of a structured day.
Yeah, exactly. I like to log in at a time that we're doing ultra local, as you point out. So at a time that's approaching their lunchtime in the region. Now I did play with close to dinner time, or like end of workday. That didn't produce as many results as just before lunch. So I mainly log in at the same time, do the batch sending, which sends to thousands of people. And if there's any type of delays, the carriers are delaying something or something got gummed up, doing it at the same time then allows you to, at least in our system, the delayed message will go out the following day at the exact same time. So if I do it every day, every Monday to say Thursday, even if there's delays, new texts are coming in at the exact same time of the day. And that allows me to appear to be pretty responsive. So when I log in, I see a bunch of responses that just got sent out because they were delayed. I can respond to them. Or while I'm working the batch list or vice versa, I'm working the follow-ups, the batches are going out, people are responding. In some cases, they respond very quickly. Like they get the message, they text right away. So having all that work done within the same kind of time bracket allows for me to appear to the customer or the contact to be quite responsive and allowing for more back and forth. And while we're doing back and forth, I can increase that trust, making them think that I'm not sort of spammer or someone from a place that might be scamming them. The more back and forth we have, the more I can put their mind at ease. So we know this is to be more effective because sometimes there's delays, or sometimes, especially at the beginning, I got a little bit bold and I sent things out on the weekends. And by the time I got around to it, or they got around to it, a few days passed and the leads are pretty cold. They're hard to get back into the system. So say something went on a Saturday and I got back to my Monday, they've already in their mind kind of given it up for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's not ideal, right? We've found that if someone responds to us, the best is that if we're there to then reply instantly. Now people listening have to realize like that's a goal, that's an ideal, but you don't have to beat yourself up over it if you can't meet it every time. Because again, what we found with a lot of clients is they obsess about automating and they obsess about optimizing, and then nothing ever really gets done. So the manual method has its obviously some drawbacks, but the positives outweigh the drawbacks. You just want to set up your schedule in such a way that you're as responsive as you can be. If someone says they want to become a lead, like, yes, I'm interested, tell me more, here's my email address. Obviously, you want to acknowledge that and send them an email as fast as possible, right? That's all entirely part of our process. But again, it doesn't You don't have to kill yourself if you're like, oh, it has to be that same minute. It doesn't. We've still got leads and stuff. You just, make it as close as possible. And another thing too, like you said, you tested weekends and stuff, Ross. I know when we started, I tested at night, replying to text at night. And of course, that's when you have the most chance for most people, unless they work a night shift. Most people are sitting around on their homes with their phones in their hands. They get a text, they text you back. But what we found is it just wasn't sustainable with our own personal schedules. We didn't want to be working at night, and the client doesn't want to be taking calls at night. And it created this weird ecosystem of like, well, why are you texting me at night? You see what I'm saying? So it's not just a matter of just being a tactician and saying, well, what's the best time? I got to pick the right time, and Sean and Ross have to tell me the exact time to text people. Again, it's business specific. It's branding specific, like we've been talking about. But you also have to be reasonable. Like, when can you actually service people? Do you want to create the expectation in them that you're going to be around at 10 o'clock at night? Even though we had some success with that, we pulled back on it immediately because it did not suit the overall business goals.
Within a bracket of a workday, say mid-morning to early afternoon, if I do feel like leads might be building up even though I'm not watching it, I will go back around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon my time and get back to these people. And now they've waited 1 or 2 hours. That is a very human approach. That actually reduces their fear that it's a robot, because a robot would truly be very instant.
Yeah, right. It's like you took a lunch break and then you came
the lunch break. That's right.
Yeah.
Or I'm busy doing other things. So, but there is a limit to that. If I let 2 days go by, it's not going to work. I find if I go more than a few hours, it starts to diminish. So at first I was doing it based on my time. Oh, I got spare time at 10. Let's just send out some text. Oh, I got some spare time to send out text. It needs to be kind of scheduled. It needs to be definitely blocked, like I said at the beginning, but you can do it another part of the day, because they might have just got it at the tail end, right? You just logged off for the day, and now all of a sudden you got 5 leads sitting there, 10 leads sitting there that are not going to get worked for the whole day. That kind of eats me up a little bit inside. So if I do have a moment, I will log in a second time. I won't send any more batches, but I will process any type of warm lead that said they're interested. And again, I feel like that works because it still gives a human feel, like someone is running this thing that's a real person, and within roughly their time zone and all that stuff.
Well, that's a really great point. Yeah, a slight lack of automation and perfect reply times is it maps out to what we said at the beginning, which is like you want the messaging to feel very personalized. You want to look different than a scammer and spammer. And so building and all these things, just treating it like people hear the word text and automation and regulation and all this kind of stuff, and they think it's a unique and new thing. But everything that we're talking about is really no different than old school telephone outreach, right? I used to call whatever new leads or I get up in the morning and I'd call customers back because they were the easiest people to talk to, and it gets you used to talking on the phone. Then you'd do some follow-ups, then you'd have lunch, then you'd call new leads, then whatever. So it's the same process you would use manually with any other sales tool over the last 50 years. If people can think about it in those terms, it won't seem so exotic and impossible to comprehend.
Yeah. And then, we could talk a little bit about list cleanup. So, again, Sean has written some very good replies for this, and the goal for me is we're dealing with a lot of, sorry to skip around, but we're dealing with huge numbers, right? And if a lot of people express okay interest or some warm interest, you can start building up, but never pull the trigger. That you can start building up a huge list of semi-interested folks that go nowhere. Like I said, they ghost or they just ignore. So those messages we send to kind of re-engage them. Eventually we'll get to the point where we want them to say yes or no, because I need to get them off our warm list and into hot or into not interested. So we have crafted those replies to push them there, just so that I don't have to manage this giant warm list and sift through it and see if I forgot or left anyone that just needed one more nudge to push over to the hot lead. So we do work through it each day, going through all the previous warm leads and push and ping them a little bit more to the point where then I either have closed them into the main funnel or have marked them off as not interested. And that's quite important, because if you've been doing this for a long time, even a few months, the numbers start to pile up. Literally, the numbers that you have in the system will start to pile up and it'll become unmanageable.
Yeah, our messaging for the batch sends, of course, changes, right? Because we're allowed to send once a month. So month 2, month 3, month 4, you don't want to hit them with the same messages before because clearly that didn't work. So what we're doing there is just going different angles of benefits or different angles of pain points. But then these, what we're calling the warm leads or the follow-up messages, none of that is automated. Those are all on a person-to-person basis. And so what we're doing there is more of a relationship progression style of messaging. And fortunately or unfortunately, anyone who's done sales realizes that yes, you may have to ask people multiple times to become a lead, and that's totally acceptable and fine. But like Ross said, they don't get infinite chances. So you'd have to tailor this for your own business and your own style. But what we like to do is we like to give people about 3 chances. And by the third chance, if if they said they're interested, but they're not pulling the trigger on giving their contact details for whatever reason, then we get what I call increasingly belligerent. Now, that's a bit of a, I'm being a little bit funny there. Like, I don't mean you say to them, hey, asshole, do you want to do it or not? But the tone kind of has to be along those lines, right? I believe, anyway. If you've given someone 3 or 4 or 5 chances to do something and they keep saying they want to do it, eventually you just come back and say, like the classic one in cold outreach with emails is, hey, it seems like you're not responding, so I'm just going to close your file. Now, Ross, you and I both know, like, I don't personally use a message like that because I've never found it to be that effective. But it's something of that nature. Eventually, you're approaching something like that, and then you just have to have the person who's working the replies and outreach make the decision. Okay, I pinged them enough times. They still haven't said anything. I'm going to have to give up on this one.
Yeah, I give them time. Not a lot of time, but one, I gotta close the file if you will. It's just too many messages to manage. But people are busy. People see the notification. They move on for their day and then think they want to reply. So that's a very real scenario where those people are interested. They're just a little too busy. So you got to give them time to live life and do their business and their thing before they get back to you. But yeah, you definitely can't be giving them a ton of messages. You can give them time between those messages, but you can't give them endless messages. And it works. It works well. Like that final message in some cases, or in a lot of cases, they do pull the trigger finally because they are legitimately interested. Just keep pushing it off, pushing it off, pushing it off. And in some cases where we said, okay, we're going to mark you off as not interested, I even threw up the last one. Okay, okay, that's it. I'm marking you as not interested. And I click the X on the system. In some cases, even though I've marked them off as not interested and the system's hiding them from me because they didn't do DNC, they can get back to me. And in a few cases, they did get back to me. So even that last final kind of like, we're not going to talk to you anymore, uh, can convert, which is weird if it's done properly. Like, I don't know what's going on there in terms of guilt or busyness or whatever, but it's just another way to keep a conversation and keep us on the top of their text stack, right?
Yep, exactly. And like you said, it's more what the folks listening would have to comprehend is it's more about us managing our inbox and schedule and time. The person on that end, if they don't delete the text, I mean, they actually do have infinite time to get back to us if they want. We have to obviously have to process it and move on and think about when we're going to buy the next list. So I'd probably end it at this, Ross. We know this works. We didn't know if it would work when we first started it. And after doing it for a few months and analyzing the past results and tweaking it, we're pretty shocked at how well it works if you have the budget and the time. And like again, your sales process and stuff makes it worthwhile to do this type of thing. But it is a really great way if you've run out of other avenues or you're looking for ways to grow the business. So do you want to just give like a final summary of maybe like roughly how long does it take just to get something like this up and started and spinning, and maybe give a minimum dollar amount that someone might want to commit towards paying for the software and buying the list and at least initially doing a test run to see if it'll work for them?
Yeah, if you had patience and time and not a lot of money, you could probably get going for a few $1,000s on the list, and I think about $500 for the month of the tool in general, at least the tool that we've been using. And you'll work through that list quite quickly because it won't be a huge list for a lot of money, that amount of money. But if you have the patience, you can do the follow up every other month. And we found that, at least in our system, we started getting clients for our client within the 90-day period. We had interest almost immediately, but those didn't materialize into what we consider a sale until much later in our actual funnel. Although I think the turnaround is quite quick, especially when gearing up. That was neat. Now, in terms of actual setup, you can get a tool going pretty quickly, and then it's a matter of doing a 10 DLC registration, which can take up to 10 days. If you're doing everything by hand, you'll get the tool. You'll find a list, buy the list, filter the list, put the list in the tool, build messaging, initial messaging, craft that. You want to do 3 or 4 variations, and then work and then send out the batches and work that list. That's kind of a speed run through how that would work. And then once they say yes, you grab their information, you put them into your main funnel.
Yeah, and I think we found it was about probably just shy of 2 months from when we started texting and getting leads to when we had the first big sale. And again, we're doing big ticket items, so it was a $50,000 sale within 2 months. But what we found with lots of clients is that they hear about a new tactic like this or a new type of advertising campaign, and they're really gung-ho for the first couple of weeks. And then after a month has passed, if it hasn't fundamentally transformed their business, they start to get really nervous. And then by the end of month 2, they usually want to tap out. And just unfortunately with this type of thing, this type of campaign and setup, this is not a 1 or 2 month testing thing. Like I'd probably say give it at least 3 months to test it, because even the leads even at the sale we got after 2 months, by the 3rd month, we were still working the leads we got from the first month, right? Because of the sales process. So it does require a bit of upfront cost and money, and it does require some commitment. It is not for everybody. It's not a guerrilla marketing budget. I need to see results in 2 weeks type of activity.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you're going to do the 15 and 15 that you talked about, split the list in 2-week chunks, you're going to have to load a new list every month for 3 months, and then work the previous list every month for every month on the 15-day cycle. So you'll need a budget for that to be somewhat effective. And yeah, you just need to be patient. It is very effective, but it's not overnight success. That's for sure.
Yeah. And this is why we're putting together a course on this. We're sort of tied up doing this for a few clients. So we were excited by it. We did want to give people a little bit of an introduction to what we were doing, which is the purpose of these podcasts. But we will be doing a much more comprehensive course in the future. Right now, there's no sales page or registration or anything set up. But if you're listening to this and you're at all interested in learning more about these methods that we're talking about, the simplest thing to do is just to send me an email, info@repria.ca. That's info@repria.ca. Put something in the subject line like text leads or, lead building or anything like that. And we'll just know to keep in touch with you. Because basically, if you're at a stage where you want to create new business and new sales out of thin air, especially when your current channels have dried up, or like you've tried social advertising and it's not doing what you want, you tried Google pay-per-click, it's not doing what you want. We were skeptical, and then we saw how this worked. We're pretty amazed by it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Ross, do you have any last thoughts before we close this out?
No, I think we covered it. Like I said, it's not overnight success, but it definitely is a big push, and is very effective once you get it going if you do it right.
Oh, totally. And so, yeah, this is sort of part 2 of 3. The third part in the series, which we'll release in the next episode, is going to be tying it all together once you get the leads. What is the most effective way to follow up with them, keep them warm, and cultivate them into sales? If you're not satisfied with your current website or the service you get from your provider, you can switch to websites.ca for free and get a great support team behind you. Just visit websites.ca or email Ryan directly at ryan@websites.ca.
Thanks for listening, guys. Catch you next time.